What's going on, coin traders? How we doing? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Bitcoin Cash, BCH on that ticker. Overall, a pretty nice setup. So ever since seeing our trend high come in, didn't really necessarily see that much of a pullback compared to what a lot of the other altcoins did. So looking at 61.9% from the high. So from current prices right now, only about 47% pullback to that trend high. So if we do look at a percent gain up to that upside movement, about 90% up to 720-ish right now. So almost a 2x to the current trend high, and then from there looking at much bigger gains, because right now, although we see from this longer weekly term, based off especially when we saw our launch, every since putting in a lower highs, right now we know that the setup that we're looking at right now is much better than what we have seen previously for this stage of the cycle, and we're going to be talking about that here in the show today. So I do want to start off doing a deep dive into this current daily chart right now, because like we mentioned, trend high came in on the 5th of April. So ever since, the nice thing about this setup is that actually a huge pullback initially, but we are starting to slow down and find this very nice rounded bottom where we've actually already put in our low. And for the low coming in at 273.33, and ever since have been putting in higher lows until now are starting to shape a very nice uptrend. Actually see a lot more upside movement to kind of confirm now the right side of overall this curvature and longer term accumulation pattern, which could be setting up potentially for a longer term cup and handle pattern, which would be extremely bullish. But nonetheless, we know that these type of setups where they do have quick pullbacks and then they slowly start to slow down in terms of where we are finding our base level of support, a little bit more on the sideways. This is the accumulation zone. And then from there, we do have a little bit more of a nice bullish sign to actually see some price action to the upside. Whereas before we were looking at constant downtrends until we set our low, and then finally we're able to punch in, set that new higher high. So now if we go ahead and zoom in on the current, what we're looking at right now is a very nice setup where we were getting stuck up in these exponential moving averages, finally broke through them, retraced. But then what we usually have happen is that when we do finally break through the exponential moving averages, and although they weren't full bullish yet because we didn't have the 26 period on top of the 50, even though the 12 period EMA was on top of the 50 period EMA, what actually happened is that despite losing it, and this is kind of more or less based on typical market retracements, but after finding a bottom and a stabilization for that support, very nice upside to test these once again. And then this is the huge candle that let us know very nice upside movement. Almost a Marabuzu candle, very small lower shadow, and then the upper wick is almost non-existent. So most of the price trading on this daily candle was just upside direction. And then if we actually look, although we didn't have the biggest day in terms of volume, in fact, we actually saw a lot greater volume on this bounce day after seeing a pretty substantial sell-off. Still a very good sign though, especially when we have seen less bull volume compared to a lot more bearish volume, but this bearish volume only covered about a third of the overall body of the candle for that previous day bullish bar. So that does show that a lot of bear pressure isn't necessarily leading to a lot of bearish downside, and we do have a lot of dip buying and support coming in for this overall price chart for Bitcoin Cash here. Now, we did have a very clearly defined price level of closing resistance here up overhead at 370. So the current daily candle right now looking like we are breaking it, but obviously this candle just started not too long ago, so still have about 20 hours before it does print. But if we can print a very nice close on top of this 370 line, very, very good sign, because if we do look left, we actually haven't seen prices at this level since the very beginning of August when we did have that huge market-wide sell-off. So unfortunately, that did end up happening, and otherwise it could have been very possible that based off of this trend, could have seen Bitcoin Cash actually continue upside movement. But nonetheless, the rest of the market did play out. So we actually saw this 370 line be very significant resistance for this price. So that's why the current setup right now could potentially be extremely bullish, especially after finding 2 months of just stabilizing and finding those prices, with support coming in pretty much down to right around the $300 level, just below that for the close, and down for the price levels actual, we're looking at a low of 273 like we talked about. So again, nice looking setup right now. If we actually want to go ahead and look at volume down here, it does seem very probable and plausible like we will get the current daily candle to actually top out the previous 2 days. So 2 days ago, we were looking at volume being 5,000. Yesterday's close was 14.175 thousand. Currently, we're looking at 7.8 thousand, but we're only about 4 hours into the current candle. So plenty more time to go. And it does seem very probable, like we said, in that instance, we'll actually top out and see higher highs in volume, which is a very good sign for 3 days of upside, confirming that follow through, especially after having a very, very nice bounce off these exponential moving averages for support. So looking at very nice closing level support coming in at 347 here. And we did have the price for 5 days, actually 6, continue to defend this level. Saw a little bit of wicking down below 347, but ultimately we did see closes maintain, and now upside direction does continue with that follow through, especially breaking above this big 270 resistance point. Now, looking at Bitcoin Cash being number 14 right now for the CoinMarketCap rankings based on market cap. And one of the things that's extremely bullish about Bitcoin Cash right now, too, is that it is starting to be added to some lists for potential options for asset classes and things like that for some institutional type buying. And although we don't have an ETF just yet, we know that the principles are still the same. The decentralized level is still right on par with Bitcoin here. And we are still looking at more or less the same blockchain, although we do have bigger block sizes, but we still have the same cap supply with the same more or less circulating supply as well. So plenty of good signs that do mirror what we are seeing right now with Bitcoin Core. And although we might not necessarily be seeing as good of a sign as Bitcoin Core in terms of the chart setup for an altcoin right now, we do know that Bitcoin Cash is still looking very nice, especially as we have been confirming the direction of a change for an uptrend, especially now with a full bullish formation of these exponential moving averages with the 12 on top, 26 in the middle, and then the 50 on the bottom. Now, since we are talking about exponential moving averages, do want to flip over into the 2-day chart right now. Look at the exponential moving setup because we did have our cross for bullish on 12 and 26, did have the 12 come over the 50, and now it is just a matter of time right now, especially given this nice setup, until we actually have this 26 cross the 50. So we know that we're very tight and close, and this will be the first bullish cross and flip that we have had since we actually did flip this setup bearish. So that would be a pretty good trend indicator and guide to let us know that the upside trend is in favor and path of least resistance now is to the upside there. And so one of the things we always look for when we talk about EMAs crossing and flipping bullish is that, especially after confirming that they have been very resistive, we do know that once we get this cross, we do need to see a back test and a confirmation to prove that that now has flipped into support. Right now, we are seeing that, which is pretty much going to be confirming, especially when we do print this current 2-day candle, which actually is going to be closing in a little over a day. So we do have almost the full 2-day candle to print, but still nonetheless showing signs of a lot of follow through, especially if we can see, like we talked about, a close on top of the 370 level for the day. So despite looking pretty good on the upside, we do have plenty of upside resistances, and that's pretty much why, unless we do have some news-driven catalyst to just shoot this price up, why on these type of patterns, it does take a little bit more of a slow, gradual growth in order to see a little bit more of that rally, because we do have a lot more of those price level resistances upside, and it does take a lot of trading time to actually get through those. So if we do look at trading resistances to the upside, we're pretty much looking all the way through about the 450 level, which is where we did have a lot of previous resistance, as well as the heartline for a lot of support. So if we actually turn on the VPVR volume profile visible range, and we do look on the right over here, you can see that that is a very big point of massive upside resistance. So we could see if the price does approach that level from 425 to about 450, very big point of resistance all the way up until about the 500 psychological level. And then that is where it would start to get a lot lighter on the current trend anyway. So that's where we could actually expect a lot more of that faster growth, which should shape out nicely that cup type of pattern. Now, I do want to look at the RSI, Relative Strength Index, for this 2-day chart. Mostly just want to talk about the trend with relation to this yellow line in the center, which is the exponential moving average for the RSI. So typically this isn't going to be as solid of an indicator in terms of finite levels as we do see for the price chart in terms of EMAs. But what we do have is an overall generic trend. And as long as the big side of the movements for the RSI do still maintain on top of the EMA, and we know that the amount that it does dip below the EMA is extremely minimal, that's what's going to be a very good sign for this trend to continue. Because when we have the opposite is true, where most of the mass is actually below, that's actually what's going to be a bad sign for the price movement, because then in that instance, the trend is going to be following the exponential moving average guide. So if I just speculate just based off of where we are currently on the 28th of October for the 29th closing, and drawing out this basically in terms of time for where we could see this bottom play out, actually looking kind of more towards the start of the year, So basically just a little over 2 months on this 2-day would be just in line with pretty much where we'd be sitting, which pretty much historically is where we do see a lot of the big magnitude moves start to take off. So that could be really where we start to see the price start pumping. And so I think over the next couple of months, we could see a slow, steady uptrend and knocking through a lot of those resistances for Bitcoin Cash. So now, like we talked about, we are set up a little bit different historically than what we have seen in the past, which does let me think that we are probably going to see a little bit higher highs this cycle compared to what we actually saw last cycle when we did put in a lower high compared to right when Bitcoin Cash actually launched. So one of the things specifically, and we are on the monthly chart right now, is that after putting in our bottom, which was right around the $100 level, this very nice upside got stuck between the 26 and the 50 period EMA resistance on this monthly chart. And like we talked about, we do want to pull back and actually confirm and prove previous resistance levels and now as support. So with all of this upside move, pulling back and seeing month after month after month after month, confirm support on this 26 period, the 12 period EMA. Very nice guide, especially now we did have our explosive move, 2 months of very nice follow through, and then now several months of pullback that actually hasn't even wiped out the overall magnitude of this monthly candle we saw in March. So if we do want to go ahead and count the number of months so far, we're looking at 6 months that it has taken for pullback to actually see prices retrace for what it took 1 bullish month to do here back in March. So very good sign, especially now after confirming that resistance point as a very nice support point. So we have seen 4 months right now start to confirm this EMA as very nice support, which did hold for a close on the monthly pretty much right around the 320 level. And now, so we do have the October candle about to close here in a couple of days, but we do still have the opportunity to put in a higher high for volume here and month over month increase, because for the close here in September, we're looking at 343.63 thousand. And on the current month right now, looking at 316.852. So not too much more time, but we know that the magnitude of the candle is what's important, especially after showing follow through after confirming a very nice support off this 26 period EMA on this monthly chart. So if this can continue, then we will be looking at a nice full bullish cross of the monthly EMAs, which does confirm a bullish uptrend on the longer term, which is extremely good for longer term growth and momentum. So 4 years, for example, we were still getting stuck up in between the 12 and 26 period monthly EMAs. And although we didn't necessarily on this chart have the formation of a 50 just yet, we would have been well below the 50 as well. But so we know that, for example, here's October and November of 2020, which was 4 years ago right now, so that you can see how we were getting stuck up at these resistance points compared to now where we are in the cycle. We're actually looking very nice and very bullish with prices actually starting to see a little bit more of a longer term uptrend, just starting the cycle here. So if we do some speculation based off of price growth, the end of the October monthly candle was 262, and we actually ran up about 525% to just over 1600. So if we apply the same logic of a 525% growth from current prices, assuming we're closing right now at 388, and although we don't typically see the same, we'd be looking at about 2400 right here, which would be a very nice middle medium in between where we saw previous cycle and the cycle before that, which definitely seems pretty reasonable for a longer term and cycle upside target. But obviously that still is very speculative, and of course you should have a plan, but just know that the setup right now is a lot more bullish and shaping up to be a lot bigger of a move for Bitcoin Cash, especially when we look at where we're at actually with volumes. So even October last year, we were looking at closing at almost 700,000 compared to, like we said, we're only just over 300,000 right now, almost at 320,000. So plenty of potential for longer term upside. And like we said, we are still having a couple months before we even top out likely this current trend high above 7, right around 720. But the setup is definitely starting to change in greater longer term favor for a bullish upside move. And that's also barring any sort of catastrophic events across the crypto space as well. But overall, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff down in the comments sections below. Do love hearing from each and every one of you. Feel free to reach out over on Twitter or X. Otherwise, though, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button if you have not done so just yet. Greatly helps me out. That is going to wrap it up for now, though, so stay safe, take care, everyone. I'll catch you back in the next video.